So I figured out how to uh, build and set up the debugger on VS Code. So I'm just gonna try to step over. It already comes with the debug configurations, but I figured out how to build. And the problem was both with the I think it's Node GIP and with the MS Build compiler, because I needed a tool. And I don't know exactly what was wrong, but I know that I tried a bunch of things and then it seems that it's working now. So I'm just gonna step over, see what happens. I'm gonna probably change the way that I'm doing this as well here. I think I'm probably gonna use a class instead. Just expanding. Because it doesn't look very. It is a lot harder to make things work if I do it with functions, and I think that with classes is gonna be easier. And I'm also gonna be able to have both. Yeah, but I'm gonna focus on this on another time. I'm just gonna close this stuff as well. I couldn't figure out how to put the breakpoints as soon as it starts because it's slightly different. I've never used VS Code's debugger with Node, so it is different than C++, and the configuration that they have here is different as well. But basically, the way that it works is you can use this compound key on the launch.json config. You have both the configurations key and the compounds key on the launch.json. And just like the name says here, it allows you to put a bunch of configurations on one single thing. So it basically runs all of them. The launch ones, I think, are the ones that build things. And attach is when you just want to put a debugger on a process that is already running. So it doesn't allow me to put stop on entry on any of these configurations here, which is the way that I was doing before. So on the actual configuration, when you're using C++, I think it is stop on entry. If you put stop on entry, it's just gonna stop at the first function that it executes. But when I put in here, it doesn't work, and I think it has something to do with this difference between launching and attaching. And I think like the configuration that I'm running now, which is this one, it's gonna launch I'm not really sure which one is which. I think that this one is probably building the code internals, so like the source code for VS Code, and the other ones have to do with the different processes that VS Code uses, so like extensions, for example. And I'm not really sure about the other two, but I know there is a web debug configuration because in some situations VS Code allows you to launch the browser. I think when you use npm or yarn or whatever, VS Code under the hood creates a server, and then it opens up, and that's how that's how you are able to open your site on the browser. Things both from the framework you're using and VS Code. There's something with that, but I'm not really sure how it works. So I put some breakpoints based on what I think is the beginning there. And this is what I was looking at the last time. I think that this is the first line that it runs from the actual thing. So ChatGPT told me that is on the internals, but I put a breakpoint there and it didn't work. So maybe that runs before the launch that they have there. But I think that this one is the first one that it runs. And I already spent some time trying to understand. Now I think I've seen so the first part there's a function that is going to initialize a bunch of services, and then from one of the services is going to call another function, and then on that function is going to initialize the code application class. And it seems to me that the code application is the one that has the connection between this initialization and the actual classes that are going to be related to the stuff that I was interested on, which is how VS Code selects the beginning path. When you open VS Code and doesn't have a project, how it decides what path to show on the file dialog. And on Godot, I've seen that they have a function there. And that's the one that I'm using now to display the path there. It's just systemdir. And then you pass the path you want. That's basically this function here, and it allows you to select between standard paths that they put here. And they are just using a different function for each operational system, so it's just based on the API. So I'm probably going to use this one on the stuff that I'm doing, but I still want to understand how VS Code works more. So I think that the main class is this one that initializes everything. So that's what I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna try to clarify, create like a mental model of how it works in a better way, like how everything's connected. I think it's gonna help as well on the stuff that I'm doing. But from the not so much time that I did this, it seems that it feels different when you are debugging Node.js, but I think it might be slightly different, but not that different. And I already tested, if you don't put breakpoints, you're just gonna open the actual VS Code window, which is pretty cool. So I'm probably gonna just spend some time in the beginning, stepping over since the beginning of the execution, then see if I can, or press F5 probably to get to the window when it opens the window, and then trying to figure out based on the tooltips where to put breakpoints to see, because I think that's probably the best way to learn, because then it makes it easier to associate the mental model you already have by using the application with what's actually happening under the hood. And I assume that there's probably gonna be, this is the thing that I'm not really sure. So the way that Node GIPs work, Node GIP, I think the problem was related to something to do with versions and the plugin. So I think that each application that uses Node GIP has to build a plugin, and then on the plugin they specify configurations. And the way that Node GIP works, I've roughly seen it, the code, but not that much. But the way that I think it works is that they're just gonna use Node.js libraries and functions to figure out on the operational system the path to the executables that are gonna compile the C++ code. And that's how they bridge the gap between C++ and JavaScript. They're just finding the executables that build the C++, and then after they build, I'm not sure what are gonna use, because I haven't looked into the codes, but I imagine that it's just gonna be like a library or something like that. Because under the hood is gonna be everything binary, obviously. So I imagine there is a library, but I haven't spent too much time. But the way that it's gonna work is that Electron is gonna use Node GIP and Electron uses C++ because it's like on the front end you have the Node.js, or not Node.js, you have the JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, as far as I know from the way that Electron works, I just seen some videos and I just briefly looked into the source, so I might be wrong. But that's the mental model that I have right now. Is on the front end, the actual stuff you see is going to be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Then it uses Node.js as a bridge between the application you're building and Electron. And probably Electron is going to use Node.js as well to build the C++ files that Electron has. So with that, with the C++ code, Electron is going to communicate with the driver, and the driver communicates with the GPU, and then that's what draws this stuff. So it's kind of like a model view controller, I think. The mental model that I have in my mind right now, the way that it works. And I think that's how, based on the classes that I've seen last time, that's kind of how it works. They are using object-oriented programming, I think, because like a lot of the classes have, they all are going to inherit from the disposable class there. That is the class that manages the meters, which are the events. And it seems that there is a connection there where you have the viewer classes, which are the front end, and probably the service classes that are the controller. And the model, I'm not really sure, but it's probably just JSON files with the configuration. So I think that's how it works. And then they use the Electron API to set up the events, and probably that Electron is going to be the thing that sets up the event loop. So I think on the beginning it calls ready, and that's the event that you call to start the application, which is very similar to the way that Godot works, I think, but in a different way, obviously. But the patterns are always the same, I think. So this is the app, which is just Electron. I think, yeah, Electron. So, but it includes there in the beginning as importing from here. And then it's going to call this callback function, and then on this callback function is going to initialize everything. So after it does that, it's going to initialize a bunch of services and service classes, and then it's going to use that to initialize the other ones. And I think that the accessor thing that I've seen on a lot of places is just it's like a proxy object that they create. A proxy is just a middleman. So it's like a middleman that they create from classes that are on the front end, let's say, that are responsible for managing the view, and the classes that are going to be the controllers, which are the services. I think that's how I'm thinking about it right now, and how it works. It feels very confusing to me, and I'm not really sure if it is because like I started learning with JavaScript and Python and its dynamic languages, so you don't have to specify the types. And then after that, I think I learned C, C++, just very little about C and C++, and then I learned Rust as well, and then Solidity, and then I come back to C++. But after I learned TypeScript, I never really liked TypeScript, and I'm not really sure if it's just a bias that I have right now, because I started learning, so it felt very painful, like to transition from JavaScript to TypeScript, because especially on React and stuff like that, a lot of the times it felt that it didn't make any sense to specify what type it is, because it didn't matter, at least for me. So I'm not really sure if it's a bias that I have against TypeScript, but it just feels very confusing. But it might be something fundamental to do with types as well. I think that there is something to do with types. And I think that the types and the environment, like the environment has an impact on the types and of what forces, because of the nature of the environment and the typing structure of the language, it kind of forces the code to be more confusing. That's how it's feeling like now. So I don't really like that much though, from what I've seen, how it works, everything, because it feels just it could be simplified a lot, and it's just very confusing to understand. Probably just gonna go with F10. Like this is something that it's kind of always hard to figure out. When I was learning Godots, is basically the same thing. Like in the beginning, I just went stepped into, which is F11 on VS Code, too much, I think, and then you spend too much time on stuff that doesn't matter. But it's always hard to figure out uh, the right balance between the two. But I think that based on the previous experience that I have, it's probably more effective to just try to go faster in the beginning. Because usually what's going to happen, I think, on projects is that it's going to follow the Pareto distribution. So there's going to be functions and classes that are used most of the time. And I think in the beginning makes more sense. The way that I think about it, and it's the same with learning everything uh, outside of even this, is like creating a funnel, because it's basically the same way that the hardware works. And I think learning in general is just like computation, and it's basically the same principle, because computational space-time is a multifractal spiral. That is a hierarchy, relative hierarchies in relationship to each other that create multifractal geometry. So if you think about it, uh, on the surface is always better, I think, to try to go breadth and fast, which is basically the cache. And then you have the RAM, which is the intermediate step, and then you have the disk, which is solid. So I think that this just highlights the nature of matter on space and time, which is just a probabilistic distribution in relationship to a reference frame of awareness. So it's like you're constantly downloading the environment, because that's what space-time is. It's like the computational reducibility of a reference frame of awareness. So because of that, I think it makes, and that's why I like watching a bunch of videos as well at like a very high speed, because in the beginning when you're learning things, I think it matters more the amount of exposure you have and like for how long you have that exposure. Then once you have the exposure and once you have like a very good understanding of the general picture of how everything connects and the concepts, you then you know then you have kind of an intuition of where you can start spending more time to go in depth. I think that makes more sense. So just gonna try to go faster, and then and this thing about the tooltips also is probably very helpful. So this is also something I didn't do in the beginning, because it's a lot easier to understand how things work when you associate them with something you already understand. Just first principles thinking. So I think this is just arguments that get passed on the script. So the way that I think that it works on the launch.json there is that the launch configuration is going to launch a batch script on Windows, which is the system that I'm using right now. Yeah, it's a batch script, and then this script here is going to probably call Node.js or something to run the file in the beginning, and then it's going to pass a bunch of arguments. I think that's how it works. I'm not really sure if I can put a breakpoint on the script there. Scripts code about, let's say. I guess I can try just putting scripts here, or not scripts, breakpoints. It doesn't even allow me to put. I think it makes sense that it doesn't allow because, uh, like the debugger, I think the type of the debugger determines what kind of language you're gonna use or what framework you're gonna use to debug. So I think when you put the type Chrome here, it's gonna use the Node.js debugger. And the way that the debugger works on VS Code is that you have the front end, which is the view, which is always gonna be the same for any debugger, any language you are using. And then you have on the back end the debugger, and you have the debug adapter in the middle, which is just model view controller as well. So what happens as far as I understand, the superficial level is that every time you click something here, it sends a message through the debug adapter, and then based on the language and based on the configuration you have here, VS Code is going to figure out what debugger should use for that configuration, and is going to send or relay the message that you send from the front end to the debugger you are using, and then the debugger is gonna go over the symbols and stuff like that. So I think for that reason it makes sense that it doesn't allow me to put breakpoints on the batch because it has a Node.js configuration for the debugger. But what I can do is just go over the files here that they probably use. You can ask ChatGPT as well to see if it knows, because it looks like it's just setting variables here. It's not doing anything. The only JS file is this one, pre-launch JS. And this might be related to the stuff about process, but I do think that so maybe this no, but I think that the code that I'm running or going over is the pre-launch configuration there. So it doesn't have any process. So it should have, maybe it calls something else after. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to see what it says about this. Let's see. So it's build, lib, pre-launch. I'm gonna put breakpoints here as well. Just see if it runs anything. Sure, node modules. Maybe I should run again and try to start from here. I'm not sure if it makes sense or not. I think I'm gonna just go over a bunch of times. So this time I'm just gonna press F10 and go. The next time that I launch, I'm gonna go from here, see. But this is probably gonna spawn another process. The main thing that I'm not 100% sure about, So this is one of the main differences, I think, from the way that I was doing, because on C++, I didn't see anything that uses async, I think. Uh, Obviously, Godot uses threads, but yeah, so it is gonna be different because of the environments. So JavaScript's gonna use promises, and as far as I remember, promises are just callbacks under the hood. They are callbacks with the set timeout and set interval. It's just an abstraction to deal with this. So there's both this and the child process, and I'm not really sure what is the relationship between the child processes and VS Code's debugger. So I'm not really sure. And when I put here, it doesn't show there, so maybe it's not even gonna go on this thing. So I'm just gonna press F10 and continue. There's probably parsing the arguments that it receives there. Yeah, parse CLI. It's on the same file. So let's just press F10 a bunch of times. Blah blah. And next times I'm going to go slower. So I'm gonna figure out what is the important stuff first. It's gonna go fast. Already. The already might be good to try to step into, but that's weird. Oh, so it did go over here. So I guess we're just calling the promises that is set there before. Blah blah blah. I am curious to see where it goes. So this is the line that I was thinking. So I made the assumption that because it's importing here, it's gonna run whatever it has on this file. And because it runs whatever it has on this file, it's gonna run the main, which is gonna initialize the code class there. And the code class is the one that, just this class here. This class is the one that's gonna initialize the other one based on this function here. So this function uses this create instance and then passes this. And then it does some weird stuff to set up the arguments, but it's basically going to be the services that it has here. And that's when it's going to make the gap between the accessor. So the accessor is just a, like I said before, a proxy object to interact with the services from this class here. So I think that the code application is going to be the same thing. The functions are going to have this accessor, which is just a proxy. But I'm not really sure if that's correct or not. But probably is. Yeah, so it goes here directly because it's... actually, I'm not really sure if I put a breakpoint there. Yeah, if I put a breakpoint here... Actually, I'm not really sure if it's gonna go over next time, but it doesn't matter. This also doesn't have a constructor, so... I think that when it initializes there, it doesn't matter. This collection store, as far as I understand, is how they are gonna. It's just basically a hash. That's how they're gonna keep track of the services. And the disposable store is the stuff related to measurements, I think. So this is the arguments that I passed there from the beginning. This process, it comes from a library, but I'm not really. I think that what it does is just gets the environment variables on the system, and based on what I've seen here, it does have a lot of. It just has a lot of paths on the system, and I assume that's how they're getting there. The path that they show in the beginning. It's basically the same thing that Godot does, but on a different way, obviously. But probably what Electron is doing under the hood is just that. So depending on which operational system you're using, you're just gonna have an API, and then the API is gonna select the path based on the version or whatever. And you're always gonna have these standard paths on systems. This is, I think, a fundamental principle as well of networks on spacetime. So whenever you have a network, the synchronizing mechanism is going to be standard. And that's language, basically. It's a symbolic representation of a network. And that's why I think that the instruction set architecture is just arbitrary, because it's just a synchronicity of human network putting the pattern. And computation is just getting the space, capturing space and time through the tree of information. Just seeing the process here to see if there's anything interesting. It's basically a bunch of paths and values. Yeah, so let's move on. Oh fuck, I skipped accidentally there, but whatever. Hmm. I'm mainly interested on the connection points of the dialog classes, the viewer classes, and this service stuff for now. And I'm also curious to know what's gonna happen when it launches the window. Like how does it do that? This is on the disposable class and just setting this stuff. I think on the store that keeps track of the events. So the meter there is the class that is going to be the event class that they use. And the type you put is going to be determine the type of events, I think. Let's throw fast. The like this is something interesting that I'm noticing is that it's taking a step a lot of the times when it uses a dots, I think. And I think that this probably has to do with the like it is stepping into the JavaScript functionality. So because JavaScript uses prototypes, I think when you use a dot to access something, it's probably going over some built-in functionality to get the value. And C++ doesn't do that. Unless on certain situations where it's running a constructor, copy, stuff like that. Which is stop whenever there's a dot. Maybe actually it does, actually. Yeah, it does on the functions, but I think it's different. Maybe the difference is that because C++ allows you to code the things, then like it does that, but it goes onto the functions of the classes. And then here is just stepping, like just stopping there because you don't get to see the functionality that is built in. I think that's what's going on, probably. I'm just gonna skip this initializations here. Should not spend. The configuration might be important because I think the configuration is one of the classes related to the other stuff. As I haven't gone with the debugger yet, but I spent some time manually looking into the classes. So I have a rough idea, but not that much of how it works. I think it's probably gonna be better as well to after I get over this class here to go over fast to get to the point where it opens the VS Code so that I can interact with the application and then see if any breakpoints are shown. So I'm gonna probably look for the tooltips first, then see if I can find any and then put breakpoints whenever I find them. But the thing that I think is gonna be kind of annoying is that based on what I've seen there from the events, it's probably like it's not the place where it sets the events first is not gonna be the same place that gets triggered. So, but maybe if I put like on when it's firing off the events, should put the breakpoint there. Maybe it allows me to see what gets called later. I think probably it will, but not really sure. And then from that point is just trying to clarify more and more how everything's connected. The star is gonna get called all the time. The star is disposable star class. Let's go fast. The register is gonna run all the time as well. So I'm just gonna skip. This one might be interesting. Because I think the instantiation service is the one that is gonna run there. Instantiation service, I think is the bridge between. No, it's probably like the name says, it just initialize everything. So stopped over. So this is after initialize all the other services. And this is the part I was talking about the proxy. Because it's setting up this accessor object, and then the accessor has the getter, which is based on the ID. There's just a proxy to the service. So it goes from the service collection. I'm just gonna skip this. And because of the stuff that I said before, I'm just gonna go over faster, trying to go over faster, and not care too much about what is going on until we get to the application. Oh, this util is another thing that I want to understand how it works, but maybe next time I'm going to step into. This is something interesting as well to see what the service fragments are going to be. So it's just all the service classes that it got from the collection or from the map there outside. So it uses the proxy to get the services from the service collection, I think, which is the class that initializes it outside, and that it updates after it initializes the objects, their classes, I think, the service classes. This reflect, I think, is from TypeScript, and it just calls the constructor on And this is the reason why I wanted to see what the args was there, but I think it's just calling the constructor on whatever this is, on the code application. So this is the thing that I wanted to understand more, is like how does it work? Yeah, but I guess because the code application is the first thing that it puts there. Yeah, so it's basically just initializing the code application class using the instantiation service. This is one of the parts that I said that I didn't like that much because it feels like it's overly complicated. Um, But obviously, I might be wrong about this, but that's like the first impression that I have. Because I don't see the points of doing all this stuff. So this calls the constructor on the code application. Code application is going to be the same as the other ones, has this disposable class, which keeps track of this disposable or whatever. I still don't understand what the disposable is supposed to be. I, I don't know what they mean by disposal. They mean by class or whatever. Is a disposable a class or? Yeah, so here's gonna be all the services that it initialized on the beginning there. So through that proxy there, when it's creating the arguments, it's gonna pass the services from the beginning. So this is creating a session to send and receive requests. So I think it's an IPC as one of the classes said there, but maybe not. IPC connection. It's probably from an import there. So here sets some events. So I assume that these are like the callback functions that are going to run depending on events, depending on the way you interact with the front end there, the application. And then these functions here are going to communicate with the services. And the services are going to call the other classes that have the functionality, I think. I hate this about TypeScript as well. I think that this is probably what I don't like more than the types. Is just that it goes to the declaration, which I don't see the point. This is something that I was thinking even on C++ as well, that it feels, C++ and C, that it feels very useless to have the declaration. Like I think that the only reason or the main reason that it exists just for backwards compatibility with, because it grows then it's very hard to change, but I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just unnecessary. And I don't understand why they implemented this on TypeScript. because JavaScript doesn't have it. Like I think you can have the types without having to without having the declaration, but maybe not. Because like what would be the difference? Like just let's say you wanna have a type that you're not gonna use, you can just create on a normal file and then it would be the same thing, I think, in my mind. But maybe yeah, but you can make an argument that it would be different because of the runtime, but I think it's just the same. It's just like different compilation or different interpreting processes that you can use to like depending on how you're gonna parse the file. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to implement this. It would make a lot more sense to remove. And I was thinking about this as well. But I think the thing that makes it very hard to remove from C++. So I was thinking about like how can I create a language or something that is basically just C++, but you just remove the headers. And uh, the problem with this is that it's very hard to because probably the way you would want to do it is by using LLVM to make it easier. But you have to spend a bunch of time understanding how everything works. So not sure if it's worth it to do this. But I think that's like just removing the headers and the declarations, it would like, and minimum I think would decrease by 2. Like in most cases, because usually people are gonna have one header for each C++ files. So you would decrease the size of the projects by 2. And I don't understand why it's not like this. Because I think that anything you can do with the header is it's possible to create. I don't see why it wouldn't be possible to create a compiler that does exactly the same thing that the declaration does, and then you wouldn't need the linker. Maybe the linker it would be necessary because of the connection between C++ files, but I think the header is like kind of useless. This is still, I think, on the, or maybe not. Okay, so this is still on the code application. So they use this instantiation service again to create the other class, passing this other classes as arguments. I'm gonna skip this. I'm just gonna skip everything. So now I'm just gonna press F10 until I get to the application. Okay, so here it seems that this is the place where starts the application. So this should be interesting for next time. Sure, I'll open the first window. I'll be right back and go to the bathroom. Interesting. So mutex, I think I'm not really sure if it is, but I think it is. Hmm. Here it seems that it stops. So mutex from on C++ is I guess like mutex is a concept, but like you have the std mutex, which is a class, and it's basically something that allows you to or makes it easier to manage different threads. So it allows you to synchronize or stop or prevent data races and stuff like that. So I think that it doesn't go over here because it's probably going over the C++ code, I would assume. The question is like, how do I find this stuff here? Because there isn't a special pattern. Like, I vaguely remember this from TypeScript, but I don't know how it works. But I do know that on React or Next.js or stuff like that, yeah, it's probably gonna work based on the parsing. So I think it was on Next.js or React that you have a file there, a special file that you can put on the root of the project, and then the framework is gonna read the file probably, and it's gonna parse the file to get the configuration, and then based on what you put on that file is gonna have the like you can put a heuristic to make the paths easier so that you don't have to write that. It's kind of like a flag character or a special thing. The same thing that they have on the launch.json where you can put a pattern to replace like a path. So maybe on the root of the project I can remember where the if they puts there, or maybe they do it somewhere else. But I can see if I can find the like what the VS Code path here is supposed to be. If I can't find the file directly. So it's probably coming from a library. I guess like the easier way is to just ask ChatGPT. I missed where the thing was at. So I'm trying to figure out again. Fine. The problem is figuring out where, because then I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time understand the build system. Whereas next time maybe I'll try to. My problem is that is a string, so it's not gonna show the value. So what is the path? Should have, maybe it doesn't matter that much anyway. Because this is where it stopped here, so I wanted to see if I can find the file so I can see like what is going on here because it didn't go into. But I assume that it's probably gonna be something related to the build system, and it's probably gonna be I think it's an API that Electron provides. So like Electron is gonna build the mutex under the hood on C++ or C, and then it's going to provide some Node.js code to allow the application to communicate with that, and that's the way you do it here on the. But I think that this has to be a JavaScript file, right? But maybe not. I'm not really sure. And it's probably not here as well because I can try to. But it's not gonna allow me to. Yeah. Like I think that it probably doesn't have the file here. It's probably coming from somewhere else. Maybe it's better to try to figure out the VS Code special path there. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to figure this out either. Usually worth it to spend a bunch of time trying to figure this out. I am curious about this, but I'm not sure if it's worth it. I'm not really sure if it's the path because of the linked file there. If it is the path of the root folder, but it doesn't have any Windows mutex thing here. So it might be the node modules here, but I also think it doesn't have mutex. Guess I can search for the config files as well. That doesn't have anything. These files are already using the path. They're not defining the path. But I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a package. So it might be related to Electron. So last thing that I'm gonna search. Config. So I'm gonna search both the names here. I guess I can spend more time searching for it. I'm probably gonna spend more time later because I am curious to know what is going on, because even if it doesn't, I assume that it is what I was talking about there. That the thing is probably gonna be maybe it is like a module. So as far as I remember, the way that it works on JavaScript is when you put the index.json file and you're creating a library, the index.js is going to be the entry point. So I think it's something like that where probably Electron is going to build this library or whatever, and it's going to be an entry point on JavaScript that is going to use Node.js to find some library on C++ that is going to use mutex. So I think that's what's happening. And if that's the case, then it might be possible to just find the library and then find the code and see how it works. Because I'm kind of curious on how the connection works between whatever is happening under the hood there and the import. Yeah, whatever. I'm gonna search for this later, so I don't spend too much time. So what I'm gonna do is just look into the tooltips there. I'm gonna write a bunch of tooltips and then see if I can find on the code the place, put breakpoints, and see if anything runs or if the breakpoint catches anything. That's probably the best thing to do. But I'm 100% sure that that's the last place. The place on the mutex there is the last place that it executes, and then probably there's a loop somewhere that is gonna be the render loop. So that's probably the application there, the thing that is running. So like the library there, the include here or the import is going to be the thing that has the like game loop that renders the stuff that shows up here. So I assume that is something related to Electron. So let's see what I can. So I'm gonna think about functionality that might be interesting to see. Obviously, maybe the tooltips on the icons are gonna be interesting. Oh, actually, the debug adapter might be very interesting. I think I'm gonna spend time on the debug adapter because it's gonna help me. So like I kill two birds with one stone. It's gonna help. Going over this is gonna help me understand how they taught like the model that they have there on VS Code with the debug adapter with the model view controller thing, and what I'm gonna do on the other one using the Godot stuff. And this obviously I'm already thinking about this, but I have no idea how I'm gonna do it. But probably the mental model that I have is just use the OS class on Godot to find executables, and then we just use whatever the debug the operating system allows, and you can find on the system. So use OS to launch that process, the debugger process, and then you attach to that process from the front end, which is probably, I assume that's how it works as well with their thing. So the debug adapter would be the code that does the bridge between the two. And I think I probably will have to write this on Godot. Yeah, so use the classes on Godot to create another class that bridges the gap between whatever happens on the front end, which is just going to be an event. So the class receives the event, then on the function of the class is gonna have some control flow to decide what is the debugger based on the configuration or based on the language. And then this is another question that is interesting. Is like why do they have why do they have configuration? I do it makes sense like because it makes sense for the command line arguments, I think. But I think that if you the main two things are gonna be command line arguments and the language. I think those are the two things, and then it doesn't matter. So, but maybe it is better to have a section where you have a configuration where you just put because then obviously it's easier to figure out, or to have like multiple different things you can run with the debugger. But I think that there's like different things that I'm gonna see, but like the thing is I'm only gonna be able to think about this once I get to the point where I have the other stuff. So it's not worth it to think about this now. But I'm gonna see if I can, like, superficially going over here is I'm probably gonna go back and forth between the two to clarify how they do it. But I'm definitely going to do differently, I think, than the way that they do it there. So I think that's probably the true ones. The search is not very interesting, I think. Maybe the extensions as well is interesting to understand, but the extensions I think is gonna be more annoying because it's a different process. So I think based on roughly what I've seen there, I think on the VS Code's documents or the stuff that they give there on the repository, like as a tutorial, the I think that's where I saw. They have another like for debugging the extension is another configuration you have to set, but it probably is related to this one. I think it has to be because this one has access to the thing there. So I think that these are the three main things here. And then open file, new file as well. But I'm not that curious about it anymore. About this too. This one I already seen there. This is gonna be register view or something, the name of the class that has this stuff here. And I think that like an analogy with Godot would be that each scene on Godot is like what's showing up here. And when you're using Electron, it's basically the same thing, but instead of a scene, is a browser. So it's like a HTML page, I think. So what renders here is basically HTML. The functionality is going to be the JavaScript, and then the rendering engine is Electron. Like Electron is going to create the rendering engine. And the constructors are not going to help very much. I want to put breakpoints on all of this. Maybe I should have done this in the beginning. But I actually, yeah, maybe, but it doesn't matter that much. I can just open again. Because probably a lot of these things are gonna be happening in the beginning there when he's initializing everything. This is another part that is kind of tricky to figure out. Because of the nature of the configuration there, and because like it's not the same as C++, has different processes, and has like the debug adapter is gonna be like I don't have a very clear vision of how it is connected with all the processes. It's kind of hard to know if it's gonna initialize everything, if it's gonna run, uh, or this is part of another process or something like that. I'm just gonna usually tooltips as are better as well because they're more descriptive, so there's higher chances you find something. You can find exactly what you're looking for. Yeah, so open file. That's one that I forgot to see. Yeah, the problem is that this is gonna be the icons. Maybe there's a space, you know? So it might be here. Yeah, I think it has to be. That's why it's not showing there. So it's based on the data here. Just gonna remove JSON. I think it's that place already seen. So I'm just gonna search for the other ones. Yes, if it's not showing directly, that should be based on the data. So I think it makes sense that it's based on the data for the stuff here because it's probably have some function to create the tab. So the functionality of the tab, so it's not gonna show the like this pattern here is gonna be dependent on data because it's gonna be dependent on like how people want to configure the thing. Because it's something that is probably gonna change a lot. Not change a lot, but like it's designed to be able to change. So I think it's probably I'm gonna open the tabs, click, and then see there's any other. There's probably a lot of tooltips on each thing. And this is also interesting. And this one is the one that I was seeing in the beginning there. I'm probably gonna have to go back to the initialization to see if it's gonna stop at any of this. You should probably put breakpoints on this as well. This one is the same function that runs on, so like assume they use this class to register all the view things, and then there's something to do with the locate there and the string pattern that is gonna determine what function or what happens after the view is interacted with, I think. Oh, so maybe I think this is probably what's creating the thing there, because like it says SVG here. This probably creates the icon. Yeah, path debug SVG. So, let's see if I online just see. Ah, so this icon here is the one that shows. Huh, interesting. It looks like this is the whole thing here. But I think it's the icon it shows when you put the breakpoints. Or when like when the line is running. I think that's what the icon is. Let's see if I put it like this. This one is gonna be hard to find, so I'm gonna look into the question is which one should do first? The files here, Explorer, and probably debugger. I'm probably gonna try to focus more on this thing. I'm gonna focus on the debug more because I think that's what makes the most sense to do. So like I said before, it kills two bugs with one stone. At the same time that I'm gonna learn more about VS Code, I'm going to clarify more, like, or have in the back of my mind how it works, so I can structure the other one. Which is gonna make it easier to think about how to create the Godot one. Yeah, so pretty sure now that's so obviously this is gonna be related to the what it shows there. And here is not the exact thing because it is based on the which operation or yeah, I guess framework or operational system that is using. So another thing that I should probably do is just put a bunch of breakpoints on the registry class because it seems that this is the main class that is going to be used to create the views, and the views are whatever's going to show there on these things. But this one is probably so it's the same thing that happened on Godot. and I think this is going to be happen on all the projects. Like these classes are usually the ones that are going to run all the time because they're used in a bunch of different classes. So in the beginning, it makes sense to put breakpoints, I think, because like it allows you to see in some context, but later it just gets very annoying because it always runs. On Godot, the version of this would be the call data and the string call data and string class. And call data, string name, and hash map, stuff like that. That runs all the time. So this is interesting. So it's probably part of the reason why it broke there. And it's also interesting that it's broke, but it looks like it is. Yeah. So this is probably part of the loop there. But I'm gonna continue putting the breakpoints. Then I'll step over. So I assume that it's gonna be the same thing with this one. I'm not gonna be able to find, so I'm gonna have to search for small parts of this. I already put breakpoints on this one. Yeah. I think the other one's gonna be the same thing. Oh, this is another thing I'm gonna have to think about again, because based on the way that I did there on Godot, the way that the file system was working, there's some problems that I have to solve now. That it's like it seems that it's not working with the signals, and like I'm gonna have to change things. But outside of that, the other issue is that the way that I'm doing is based on the configuration. So like the first time you open, then you select a path. Is going to first time you open, it has a button to select a folder. Then after you select a folder, it's gonna save that on the configuration file. And then after every time after this, that it has the config file, it's just gonna use the path from the config file to open in the beginning. But the issue is that like if I do like this, then I can't have like more than one instance of the thing because all the instances are gonna use the same path. So obviously there needs to be a way to distinguish the instances. And I think that's the reason obviously why they have this workbench. So probably on the settings, but this is the part that I'm not really sure because like how do you connect the setting configuration with the way you save to the file? Because the class, like you can't hard code on the class because it's gonna be the same class I'm gonna use on the other instances. So it has to be based on something else. This is kind of the issue. So I guess the question would be like how do they differentiate like how do they cache the different instances? I think that it has to be like some information that is based on and maybe like after each time that you as like one way you could do it is after each time that a new route is selected. Yeah, but then it doesn't make sense because you can have like you can select a new route in the same project. It has to be something that is like outside of the it should be unique to the project, but it can be used like multiple different times. So I'm not really sure how we're going to. So this is something that I have to. It will probably be good as well to study here. To understand how they use these strings here and the patterns on the strings to differentiate the projects. and how do they cache the projects based on this stuff. So now I'm gonna step over there, I think. I guess I can do it based on the project settings, so it's not that hard. I can use the project settings to do that. It should be easy. So yeah, I just realized that. So what I can do is just use project settings to get the name of the project. Hmm. No, but actually it's not the same. It's not really the same. Yeah, never mind. Because the project settings is related to the like building the application, but it would be only one application. So yeah, that should be something else. Hmm. It's actually kind of hard to think about it. There isn't an obvious answer right now. So this, so it is basically the model view controller pattern. So I have the view there, and here is going to be the model. The controller are probably the services. I'm just going to step over. And a good idea might be to look into this class here and look for different places to put other breakpoints and drag over. This might be interesting. Interesting as well. I'm not gonna put too many because then it's gonna be annoying to remove. That's another problem that I had on the first time that I did this on Gorot. That's a lot of situations I just ended up putting a bunch of breakpoints that ended up being unnecessary. So what I should have done is just go over uh, like more times and then just set up selective breakpoints, more selective breakpoints. But in the beginning, it's hard to know, obviously, because you don't understand how it works. So it's kind of hard to know what place you put. So this is probably definitely one that I should have, because this is probably where the events are gonna be. I'm gonna be able to see the events. The emitter is probably. So I should probably put a breakpoint on like all of this. Yeah. Oh, this one I do remember. It is the one that's so like this is one of the classes that was initialized there in the beginning. I remember this one, but I still don't understand like the how does it create the gap between this and the views there. Yes, I'm just gonna go over fast. So this is probably gonna be an issue. Is it the breakpoints? Oh, the other thing that I realized that actually I already kind of knew that, but what I didn't know is that you can put like I knew you can put conditional breakpoints, but you can also put breakpoints based on the amount of times. So I was reading the debug documentation there again, and then like they talk about this, but I'm not really sure if I'm gonna do that. It's not gonna allow me to put. But I'm probably gonna have to remove the breakpoint from the fire because it's gonna be breaking the loop each time. I'm just gonna press 5 a bunch of times. It's gonna be stuck here. I wanted to see if I could get to the other IPC class there that I went over, because that one seems to be related to the main loop. So, but I'm just gonna remove here now. Interesting. Maybe it is this class. I'll put a breakpoint here. Abstract storage device. So, and the question is like, how do I? Because the thing about the conditional breakpoints is that it's not very like, I think for, because I don't know like what condition is gonna trigger this that I want to see. So, hmm. Maybe this one. This is the thing that I was talking about, that there's different types of breakpoints. So I have to remember on the documentation there how this work. I'm gonna do this later. Heat counts. Maybe log message. Log message I think is gonna show the message. But I don't understand how it works very well. So I'm gonna look into the documentation again to see this. See if I can put something else there to see. And this action class is kind of interesting as well. So I'm gonna remove these ones. So it builds action each time on the loop after the event, probably. So I'll have to remove here as well. If this register is gonna be. Yeah. The idea is a string. So it is mapping the string with the emitter, and the emitter is gonna have the logic that sets the event or calls the callback function. And this is interesting to see as well. So default configuration, I think, is related to one of the classes there that it was initialized in the beginning. So this is probably so it's both this class and the abstract, whatever the name of the class was there, that create the bridge between the view and the services. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that this one, I do remember, like I think it's initialized as part of another class in the beginning there. You just stop. Interesting. Just gonna press 5. So I'm gonna see on the file one or open folder. So it's stopping on the flush here. And the problem is that I can put on the fire. So I think the fire is the first thing that is gonna run over. Or maybe I should remove from these classes that emit the events and just put on the. Yeah, but the problem is that like I think the callback function is not directly on the places that I put there. That's the issue. Like those places are just the places that it sets up the callback functions. So maybe I should go over again from the beginning and then probably go again from the beginning to try to clarify the first time that it sets those things. How is how does that configuration work? Then once I clarify that, I can go back, like I can go to the places where I think is gonna be the callback functions are gonna be, and then I can put breakpoints there, and then I can test later after the event is triggered. So I'm gonna stop streaming here. I'm gonna spend more time doing this off stream. So probably what I'm gonna do now is just go back and forth or do those two things at the same time. So since I was able to do this, just set up the debugger for the VS Code source code, I think it is very interesting to go over because yeah, I think it accomplishes three things at the same time. Like one is gonna make me better at using VS Code because I'm gonna understand more how it works. The second is that is going to allow me to understand more how they thought about the logic of the structure of the thing. Not only when it comes to the debug adapter, but also for the configuration and how they organize things. Because that's basically, I'm not really sure if I'm going to uh, like continue with this project of building the IDE, but I want to have something, at least in the beginning, that is going to be like something that I can use. Like it might not be a debugger, or it might not be an IDE. It might be like another additional tool for writing code. That's how I'm thinking about it. So it's not necessarily the case that I'm not looking into this to do an IDE, but I think it is gonna give me, it is gonna help me to clarify how to create this stuff that I'm trying to do, which is just like a minimal version of this. And like I said, I'm not gonna go in the same direction, I think. But having the understanding of how they do it is definitely gonna help me when I'm thinking about like how to structure things. To because I'm gonna remember how they did it, and then obviously it's gonna help me even like there are gonna be situations I know for sure that I'm not gonna want to do the same thing, but it's gonna make me think about how they structure things. So it's both gonna help me on the thing. It's gonna help me to understand how the debug adapter works from VS Code, and it's gonna help me to understand VS Code better. So I think it just makes a lot of sense to do this. So next time, but also I don't want to stop to on the path there that I have because I want to get over the like after I have these initial steps here, then I think that it's gonna be more about like I'm gonna spend a lot of time on the debugger to like because the debugging process and connecting whatever is happening under the hood for the language and the front end of the thing is gonna be really hard. So, but I wanna like I have to finish before I do this. I have to finish the two parts here, which is just building the IDE node and the editor debug node. So like having the initial template of how it's gonna look. So I think until I get to the point, I'm probably gonna spend more time trying to get to the point where I have this two here because once I have those components and I have the initial setup of the scene, then I think it makes a lot of sense to spend a bunch of time on VS Code and try to translate like the same initial logic for setting up the connection between the terminal that I'm gonna have there and the IDE and the operational system and the setting up the debugger as well. So I think that the initial steps of the debugger, I'm definitely gonna do it because I want it to understand more as well, like how the connection between what is happening on the IDE and what is happening under the hood on the actual debugger. So that connection I want to clarify. But once I get to the points, I think so next time I'm probably gonna focus more on finishing these other things here and solving the issue that I have there now with the other class that I'm trying to finish, the file system doc, connecting the signal on the file system doc, and probably the configuration I'm only gonna think about later because I think it's gonna be very helpful to understand VS Code better to set up the configuration. So I'm just gonna do the initial steps of the configuration now. And then I'm going to focus on finishing these other two docs. And then after that, I'm probably gonna spend time doing both things at the same time. So spend some time looking into the VS Code, going over with the debugger, and then building stuff on the Godot's on the other side. So do the things at the same time. These two things at the same time. So see you next time.